Hey guys, what's going on? It is this kid, and today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite new things to play in Shadowlands, and that is Resto Druid. So we'll be going over a bunch of stuff today. It's going to be best race for Resto Druids, stat priority, talents, which legendaries to choose, covenants, soulbinds, conduits, healing rotation and playstyle, DPS rotation and playstyle, and just some general tips to improve your experience overall. So first off, we're going to give the top 2 races for Horde and then the top 2 races for Alliance. So for Horde, first off we're going to have Troll, which has the Berserking Racial, and that ability is on a 3-minute cooldown, but it increases your haste by 10% for 12 seconds. The reason why this is so good is because not only can you cast spells faster, but the heal over time effects on your target are going to tick faster, and that way you're going to be healing for more overall. This is really good to use with Innervate in periods of high damage. Second best race for Horde is going to be the Zandalari Troll. The Zandalari Troll allows you to choose your racial, and they have access to 2 very good passive racials. The first is Embrace of Paku, which states your abilities have a chance to grant you 4% crit for 12 seconds. The second is going to be Embrace of Akunda, which will sometimes allow your heals to do an extra heal on the target. I will also include the High Mountain Tauren here because of their racial Mountaineer, which increases your versatility by 1%. For Alliance, all of the races are generally about the same. Touch of Elune for Night Elves increases your haste by 1% during the night, and your crit by 1% during the day. Organs have Viciousness, which increases your crit by 1%. Cultirans have Brush It Off, which increases your versatility by 1%. And when you take damage, heal for 2% of that amount over 4 seconds. Now just looking at this, we might be thinking Cultiran is the best, but we have to keep in mind that Night Elves also have Shadow Meld, and Shadow Meld is one of the best racial abilities in the game, even though it doesn't have any stat increases. Going into stat priority, ideally we want to go Intellect first, and then Mastery or Haste, kind of on the same level there, then Versatility, and then Critical Strike. Now keep in mind, unlike other expansions, item level is basically going to be your highest stat, and you always want to prioritize item level before anything else. Now we're going to head into talents. Now with talents, there's a lot of ways to change these up without hurting your performance, and I think that's great. I think that's what talents should be, but I'm going to show what I choose and why I think these are the best for kind of an easy playstyle. There are a few that are essential, and we always want to take those, but I'll explain those as I go through them. For the first row, we're going to have 2 choices. Abundance is going to be our choice for raiding. Cenarian Ward is going to be our choice for dungeons and PvP, but if you want more of a streamlined process and you don't want to change your talents around too much, Cenarian Ward is going to be the best choice for just content across the board. The reason Cenarian Ward is so good is because whenever your target is hit, it's going to place a heal over time effect on the target. And not only are they going to get that heal over time effect, but also all of the healing that they get in general, while the effect is on them, is going to be increased due to your mastery. So Abundance is going to come into play with raiding simply because there's so many targets in a raid. What's going to happen is with Abundance, regrowth's cost is going to be reduced by 6% for each rejuvenation that's on someone else, and the crit effect chance is increased by 6%. So eventually throughout a raid, you're just going to have a ton of rejuvenations on a bunch of people, and regrowth is basically going to cost nothing. So in the second row, we're going to have 2 choices. We're either going to have Renewal if you find yourself dying a lot, or Wild Charge if you need some more mobility or simply just want to have more fun in the game. So Renewal instantly heals you for 30% of your maximum health, and it's on a 1.5 minute cooldown. If you're just starting or learning how to play a healer, you may not actually look at your health as much as you think you would, and you may see it rapidly dropping at certain points, and that's where renewal would come into use a lot. As for Wild Charge, it's definitely going to be the better option for the mobility choices on this level. If you don't know what it does, it basically gives you a different form of charge based on which form you're in. I love this ability basically just because of two different forms. The first one is going to be the human form, and this is kind of the opposite of a Death Knight's Death Grip. It's going to launch us towards a friendly target. The other one is going to be the travel form, and it's going to allow us to project ourselves 20 yards. The next row is going to be our affinities. In this row, there's going to be two choices really. With Balance Affinity, you're going to get an increase in the range of all your abilities, including your healing abilities. So this is pretty much the only one that's going to give you a healing buff, not because of a straight output buff, but just because in situations where you would have been out of range before, you're now in range. Guardian Affinity is what you want to go with if you find yourself dying a little bit more, or maybe you're just learning. You get the passive 6% damage reduction. In general, I would recommend Balance Affinity to just about everyone though. The fourth row is one that I swap out probably the most. So Mighty Bash, first of all, is what you're pretty much always going to go in PvP. Mass Entanglement is amazing in dungeons, especially when you need some extra form of crowd control. Maybe the affix for the week is Spiteful. That's a really good time to use Mass Entanglement for when the shades spawn. Part of the Wild is going to be really good for pumping out DPS. I've been trying it out a little bit recently, and just the fact that it's 45 seconds, it usually lasts for almost the entire boss fight, so it just allows you to pump out that extra damage and squeeze some time down if you're maybe having some issues with timing on mythics. In row 5, there's really two choices, and it really comes down to which playstyle you want. If you want more of a passive playstyle and something that's a little bit easier to use, Soul of the Forest is going to be the choice you want to go with. If you want more of an active choice, and you want to pop Tree and have these big heals, Tree of Life is going to be the choice that you want to go with. I don't think Tree of Life is specifically too necessary, especially since we have Tranquility, we have Convoke typically. We have a lot of these spells that are kind of going to take the place of Tree. So I typically use Soul of the Forest. So Soul of the Forest, since it's a passive ability, you don't see it too often, so I'll explain what it does. So whenever you cast Swiftmend, it's going to supercharge one of 3 other healing abilities. With Regrowth or Rejuvenation, it's going to increase the healing by 200%, or with Wild Growth, it's going to increase the healing by 75%. So what I'll do is typically if the group is falling low, we're taking a lot of damage, what I'll do is Swiftmend one person and then Regrowth another person. You can also use them on the same target if you need some quick, powerful heals. 6th row, we also have 2 choices, but one's going to be for PvE and one's going to be for PvP. So if we're going to choose PvE, we're always going to go Spring Blossoms. What this does is each target healed by Efflorescence is healed for an additional 378 over 6 seconds. As long as they stand in your Efflorescence, they keep this heal over time, so it's extremely powerful. The reason why Overgrowth is so good in PvP is because there's CC going on all the time, and you may only have a couple seconds to apply something to your arena partner. And in this case, you're going to apply Overgrowth and maybe something like Ironbark before you get stuck in a CC again. The reason why it's not so good in PvE is you're always going to be up and available to apply heal over times to your group, while in PvP, you're really not going to have that much time and everything is very crucial. For the last row, there's going to be 2 choices again. Photosynthesis is going to be your general content. It's pretty much the best in PvP, Mythic Plus, just general stuff. Flourish is going to be the best for raiding. It does have a 1.5 minute cooldown, but what it's going to do is extend the duration of all of your heal over time effects on friendly targets within 60 yards by 8 seconds. And it's going to increase the rate of heal over time effects by 100% for 8 seconds. So what this does is every single one of your heals in the raid is going to be extended and increased. So very, very good for a ton of AoE damage in a raid, or just a lot of damage in general. In comparison, photosynthesis states while your life bloom is on yourself, your periodic heals heal 20% faster. While your life bloom is on an ally, your periodic heals on them have a 4% chance to cause it to bloom. So this is going to supercharge your life bloom, making it much stronger. If you have life bloom on yourself, it's going to be very, very good AoE healing. And if it's on someone else, they're just going to get much, much more of a benefit from it. So for that reason, and just because it's passive, I typically choose photosynthesis. So that's it for talents, really. I don't want to go over PvP talents just because they're so specific and each situation is going to be different. I can make a guide for that later, but just let me know. As the last thing, I wanted to make 3 quick adjustments to these talents if you were playing PvP. First one is going to be the affinity row. You're either going to choose Guardian Affinity or Feral Affinity if you're playing PvP. You're going to choose Guardian Affinity if you believe you're going to take a ton of damage, or if you think you're going to get trained the whole game. Feral Affinity is if you feel a little bit more comfortable and you're looking for more utility. You're going to choose that for, first of all, some extra damage. Second of all, you get 2 extra stuns. You get the Rake out of Stealth Stun, and also the Maim Stun, which is a combo point generated stun. And for Heart of the Wild, you're going to be choosing either Mighty Bash or Mass Entanglement. You're never going to be choosing Heart of the Wild in PvP. Mighty Bash is going to be the most popular. You're going to probably be choosing it about 80% of the time. Mass Entanglement is a little bit more dependent. If there are a lot of pets, or maybe like a Unholy Death Knight or something like that, you could choose Mass Entanglement, but it is very, very specific. As far as Spring Blossoms, you're not going to choose that either. You're going to choose Overgrowth, which is going to be very, very good for PvP. Spring Blossoms just isn't that great when everyone's moving around so much. You don't really get the benefit from that. So on to Legendaries. So first of all, we're going to go over Vision of Unending Growth. This is the best in rating, and it reads, Rejuvenation Healing has a 2.5% chance to create a new rejuvenation on a nearby target. This works very, very well with Abundance, and it is just overall the best in rating. The next legendary we'll go over is the Dark Titan's Lesson. This is the best for Mythic Plus, and it states you may life bloom 2 targets at once, but life bloom's healing is reduced by 10%. This is the best for Mythic Plus, and it works very, very well with photosynthesis, which is basically a very strong life bloom buff. So aside from those 2, I'm gonna give basically an honorable mention to 3 other legendaries. These are ones that generally work with every type of content. If you find yourself doing PvP, PvE, raiding, Mythic Plus, maybe some world quests and stuff, these are going to work out very, very well for you. First one I'm going to say is Verdant Infusion, and Verdant Infusion states Swiftmend no longer consumes a heal over time effect and extends the duration of your heal over time effects on the target by 8 seconds. So in general, this basically makes Swiftmend the same as it was before. The only difference is you still need a heal over time on the target, it just won't consume the heal over time. On top of that, it also extends all the other heal over times on the target. And this includes the Necrolord Covenant ability, Adaptive Swarm. So that makes it very, very good for that specific situation. So the next one that I'm going to mention is Memory of the Mother Tree. and this states wild growth has a 40% chance to cause your next rejuvenation or regrowth to apply to 3 additional allies within 20 yards of the target. This is very, very good, especially since it is so common. It's at 40% chance, you're going to be seeing it a lot, and it's going to kind of help with something that Druid struggles with, which is AoE heals. So the next one that I'm going to go over is arguably the best in PvP, and that's going to be Circle of Life and Death, which states your damage over time effects deal their damage in 25% less time, and your healing over time effects in 15% less time. So the reason this is so good is just because of the straight damage and healing buffs that you get from it. What happens a lot in PvP, unlike PvE, is you find yourself overlapping heal over time effects a lot. In PvE, you're typically up and available to efficiently reapply them when they fall off, but in PvP, you have to keep watching out for CC. You don't want to be stuck in a CC and have your healing over time effects fall off of the target during that time. This is also very, very good for teams with shamans or other classes that can dispel or purge very easily. Your healing effects are going to do way more in the time before the purge comes, and that way just your overall healing is going to be increased a lot. On top of that, you typically have a very short burst window to kill someone in PvP, so the fact that you're able to do more damage in a shorter amount of time is very, very helpful. But as far as those last 3 legendaries go, they're very, very good for just general use, PvP, PvE, really any kinds of content. I personally use Verdant Infusion because it's very, very good in Mythic Plus and PvP, and those are the 2 types of content that I really, really enjoy. For Covenants, if you're looking to be the best possible Resto Druid, ideally you want to go Night Fae for PvE and Necrolord for PvP. The reason Night Fae is so good for PvE is because it gives us Convoke the Spirits. Convoke the Spirits is going to cast 12 healing spells in 4 seconds. This is going to allow us to heal through periods of high damage where we may not have the instant cast spells to keep up with it. On the other hand, the reason that Necrolord is so good for PvP is not just because of the Adaptive Swarm Covenant ability, but mostly because of certain things that are in the Plague Deviser Merilith's Soulbind tree. These abilities that you get from this are just ridiculously better than any other Covenant or Soulbind. One specific thing inside of Merilith's Soulbind tree that I want to talk about is going to be Ooze's Frictionless Coating. What it states is, when reduced below 50% health, Ooze courses over you, granting you a shield for 15% of your maximum health for 10 seconds. May only occur per 30 seconds. Now the fact that this is only 30 seconds of a cooldown, on top of having Fleshcraft as a Covenant ability, these are 2 amazing abilities that are going to help you a lot defensively. And this is on top of having Adaptive Swarm, which is going to help your single target healing and your DPS. All these things are just going to make Necrolord pretty much impossible to not take if you want to get high rated in Arena. So for the next part, I realized that people are just going to pick different Covenants no matter what. So what I'm going to do is going to post the ideal Soulbind tree for each Covenant if you're going to do PvE, and then for PvP, I'm going to post the ideal Plague Deviser Merilith Necrolord Soulbind tree. So for Kyrian PvE, the best Soulbind is going to be Clea. For Necrolord PvE, the best Soulbind is going to be Emeni. For Night Fae PvE, the best Soulbind is going to be Dreamweaver. For Venthyr PvE, the best Soulbind is going to be General Draven. Lastly, for PvP, the best Soulbind is going to be Plague Deviser Merilith. Okay, so now we have the best stat priority, the best gear, the best Soulbind. So how are we going to play our Resto Druid? So the main thing, first of all, to know is, what does our mastery do? Our mastery is called Harmony. What it does is, for each heal over time spell that's on the target, it's going to increase our healing. So here it's important to note that when you put a heal over time spell on the target, it's not just going to increase it for one more spell, or even for just a straight up heal like Swiftmend. It's going to also increase the healing of your heal over time effects that are already on the target. So in a way, the more heal over time effects that are on the target, the healing kind of increases exponentially. With that being said, generally we already want to have some heal over time spells on the target before any fight even starts. Life Bloom is going to be the first spell that you always want to have up, and you want to place that on someone first. Not only is it a very, very powerful spell, but it can also give you clear casting, which is going to make your regrowths free. So once we get into the fight, we generally just want to be stacking as many heal over time effects on our target as possible. Something that's going to help out with this a ton is Efflorescence, and our talent Spring Blossoms that's going to improve Efflorescence. You're going to get the regular heal from Efflorescence on the ground, and then it's also going to add a heal over time effect to the targets within Efflorescence, and that's going to improve your mastery as well, so pretty much everything is just improved from that. Ideally what you want to do is keep this up for every single fight, and keep moving it around to where the most players are. On top of those two, Rejuvenation is going to be very good to just spread onto people that are taking damage. Wild Growth is going to be the ability that you want to cast first when people start taking AoE damage. Tranquility and Convoke the Spirits are going to be very, very similar in that we both press them when people are taking impossible amounts of damage, and we don't have the ability to just keep them up with regular heal over time spells. Lastly, we're going to have our two direct heal spells. Those are going to be Swiftmend and Regrowth. So the ordering of these is kind of weird. If you do have Soul of the Forest, ideally what you want to do is cast a Regrowth, then Swiftmend, and then another Regrowth. But then if you don't have Soul of the Forest, then you generally want a Regrowth and then Swiftmend after. The reason that we want a Regrowth first is because it gives us that extra heal over time, which is going to improve our mastery and make our Swiftmend that much stronger. The reason you do that extra Regrowth for Soul of the Forest is because if you remember, Swiftmend powers up that second Regrowth. With that being said, you're basically going to use these when players are getting chunked, and it would be impossible to keep them up with just healing over time spells. Now we did also get Nature Swiftness added back into the game, so what this is going to do is it's going to make your next regrowth free, and it's going to heal for double the amount. So with that, and with the Soul of the Forest talent, you could basically give out different levels of healing depending on how much people need. The first level is going to be just a standard regrowth, the next level is going to be a Nature Swiftness regrowth, the next level is going to be a Swiftmend regrowth, and then the third level, which is basically going to be a full heal, is going to be a Swiftmend into Nature Swiftness, and then regrowth. Lastly, I'll go over our cooldowns and what we can use to kind of keep people up. So first of all, Iron Bark is something we can use on other people. It's a pretty short cooldown, it's 1.5 minutes, and it's going to reduce damage taken by 20% and increase healing by 20%. As you can probably tell, you want to be using this as much as possible when there's periods of high single target damage, or just when you want an easier time and you can have a little break while you heal other players. Innervate is typically self-explanatory. What it's going to do is it's going to make all of our healing spells free for the next 10 seconds. It's usually better to use it on a different healer in a raid, because it's going to make all of their spells free and yours are going to be half cost, so you get the added benefit of that. But you're going to use this when you're either running out of mana or you foresee a ton of damage coming in and just see yourself casting regrowth a lot. Bark Skin is going to be our defensive cooldown. It's on a shorter cooldown than Iron Bark at 1 minute. and what it's going to do is reduce all damage by 20% and prevent damage from delaying our spell cast for 12 seconds. So one last thing I wanted to talk about is Soothe. Soothe is going to allow druids to remove enrages from targets, and the reason I'm throwing this in a Resto Druid guide is because lately in dungeons, certain targets are going to get enraged, and I pretty much need to remove those as fast as possible to allow me to heal regularly. Always keep an eye out for targets that you can remove enrages from. So once you get comfortable with your healing, and there's periods where you have enough heal over time spells on the target, you can't really do much anymore, what you want to do is start DPSing. Druids are definitely one of the best classes when it comes to healing and then doing a little bit of DPS as well. Doing damage as balance affinity really depends on how many targets are in front of you. It also requires you to know a little bit about solar eclipse and lunar eclipse. To make it as basic as possible, Wrath is your single target ability, Starfire is your AoE ability. If you cast Starfire twice, you get Solar Eclipse, which is going to empower your Wrath. If you cast Wrath twice, it's going to cast Lunar Eclipse, which is going to empower your Starfire ability for AoE damage. With that being said, ideally the way you want to start AoE fights is with 2 Wraths. This is going to empower your Starfire so you can do more AoE damage overall. If you're doing a single target fight, you want to cast 2 Starfires, and then you're going to spam Wrath to empower your single target damage. Aside from both of these, you pretty much just want to be using Star Surge off cooldown. On top of just the regular damage that you get from Balance Affinity, Invoke the Spirits is also going to be amazing in Moonkin form. So basically after you use Heart of the Wild, you're going to use Convoke the Spirits if you don't think you're going to need it for healing. So that is basically most of it, but now I want to go over some general tips that I found very helpful while playing Resto Druid. The first is going to be macros. I know a lot of people use mouse over macros when they're healing. I don't use those, but I do use 3 specific macros that make everything just way more streamlined for me. The first is going to be a Nature Swiftness regrowth macro. Nature Swiftness is off the global cooldown, so basically this macro is just a one-click instant regrowth for me. The next is a self-target Innervate macro. In dungeons, there's not going to be any healer besides myself, and I find myself getting really annoyed when I have to target someone, especially in the times when you're using Innervate. It's usually a stressful time, so you want to be using it as quick as possible, and I like that it's just in one button now for me. The last one is going to be an Efflorescence macro. Basically just places Efflorescence wherever my mouse is. Just makes for a better quality of life kind of thing. I don't have to click the button and then also click where I want to place the AoE effect. Another tip I can give is get used to your different forms as a druid. Bear form is going to be very good in PvE and also PvP. In PvE, whenever someone randomly targets you or you take aggro or something, it's very good just to swap over and not die instantly. In PvP, it's going to be very good when you think you're about to get stunned and targeted for a swap. Getting used to things like cat form when you need a little bit of a speed boost, or moonkin form whenever you need to do damage in PvE. It's just very good to take advantage of all the different forms that you have. Another thing is, I'll say get used to all of the utility that druids have. Not only do we have things like Soothe that I talked about, but we also have Entangling Roots, we have Typhoon if you're Balance Affinity, everyone has Ursul's Vortex, Cyclone is very good to use, and we also just have our Dispel, obviously. But take advantage of all these things. Try to learn about them, try to use them here and there, get more comfortable in general with them. Druids have a ton of stuff that we can use. Last thing I'll say is, in order to get more comfortable with the class, try playing a bunch of different things. Try going into battlegrounds, try going into mythic dungeons a little bit, try going into Raid Finder for raids. Get used to all the different kinds of content that you're able to do. First of all, it's very fun, and also it just helps with getting used to all the different kinds of abilities that druids have. Anyway, that is going to be it. If there is something that you want covered that I didn't go over, please just leave a comment. Maybe I'll make another guide for this. I know I didn't cover too much PvP. I can go into that in a different video if it is requested. But yeah, that is about it. If you liked the video, leave it a like. And if you want more, subscribe. But you guys have a good rest of the night.